I'm Rick Murphy, CEO and founder of Cogent Growth Partners. If you're a technology services provider or an MSP thinking about growth, acquisitions, and how to achieve a realistic liquidity strategy or an eventual exit, this show's for you. This is Cogent Conversations.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to George. Let's talk about the MSP and their why. Why do they want to do it? Kind of their personal readiness. You know, the private equity is putting so much money into the industry. Everybody's hearing about people selling their MSPs. They're getting inundated with emails. So when the MSP is asking their question, why should I sell? What answers have you come up with? Have you seen?
Well, yeah, mostly being on the buy side, we ask that question all the
Right.
time. Usually we're, getting in front of our clients, and everybody wants to know because it's a sticking point, right? If the seller's a little wishy-washy. So we do get a whole bunch of different answers, and some of them are kind of unbelievable at first. Then you work your way through, and you get to the truth. So you hear things like, well, the first one you usually hear, and this is the funny part, is you're talking to them about potentially selling, and the first thing they say is, "I'm not really for sale." And then they go from there. That's for step one of self-defense. It's just a defense mechanism. I've talked to people with brokers that actually said they weren't for sale. So it doesn't quite make any sense, but doing it for 20 years, you just kind of smile and move on. But the answers are typically that they think that their company's in a great place, that they're hitting a little bit of a ceiling for themselves as leaders. They're ready to step out, and they think their customers and their people will be better off in a bigger machine. That's one version. The other version is, well, I don't want to go anywhere, but I also don't think I could run this company any further than it is. So I'd like to find a new home and just work on the things that I like to do, that I'm good at doing, and call it a day. I don't want to run the day to day anymore. That's just not my thing, and move on. Both really good answers. The other ones are, the more reality into the whole thing is this space is awesome, as you know, and the good part about the space is things change all the time. The bad part about the space is things change all the time.
Yeah.
So eventually, everybody realizes the next big left turn is coming, and how far of a gap do I have before I have to actually do that, or find some semblance of making it look like I did that. And that's basically my runway to sell a company. So, that happens all the time. It's a 3 to 5 year runway, usually, of the next big thing that happens. Obviously right now, people are still dealing with security oriented things that are just going to constantly keep changing. And then, the elephant in the room with AI, some semblance of that is going to have to come out to your customers and to your own business. And that's a big left turn, and figuring out how to do that is going to be key. So there will be a whole lot of people that are going to be making that decision in the next couple of years. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons, but it's not the one that people shout out. I know it's the reason, but it doesn't really come out in a conversation. But that's typically what happens. And it makes perfect sense. That hasn't changed since I've been doing M&A in this space for 20 years, and that, since the beginning of there was M&A in the space, and it's been the same thing. The one thing that most people don't really say, that everybody says, and they keep asking me, well, all the boomers have to be retiring now. I still haven't seen this avalanche of boomers retiring because they feel like retiring. It is more of the, I can't take it any further. I'm generally ready to cash out, but it's not like they don't want to work, because most people that run a company, they have nothing better to do. Usually that's really what they want to do. That is 90% of their day, and they don't know what to do with themselves otherwise. So it's a bigger decision to say, I'm done working. So the retirement thing isn't as prevalent as every other reason you can think of.
Do the sellers ask their why? Do the sellers want to know why they're selling? You do, certainly as the what you do, but do the sellers? I'm sorry, do the buyers? Do the buyers want to know the sellers why?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why we even ask it is so that we can get to the point where we're asking the right questions and coming up with the right deal structure. Sometimes the reason for people wanting to leave does not fit the buyer. Like I said before, it's not even the leave part, it's the sell part. So some people that don't want to leave, sometimes that's a problem. Or sometimes it's because there's 2 or 3 partners and 1 or 2 want to leave or they're done. They're all in different stages of life. Other times it's 2 partners and they're in the same stages of life, but one wants to leave, one wants to go, and knowing who wants to stay and who wants to go, and if that actually makes sense. A lot of times it's backwards. The guy that wants to go is the one that needs to stay, and that becomes a problem as well. So it's a really important question to ask, and also why I said about the wishy-washy problem, because sometimes you can tell that the seller says, well, yeah, I'm looking to cash out and get out, and halfway through going through the process of figuring out what the company is worth and how the deal structure can work and everything else, they change their mind, which could lead to changing the entire deal because now I'm not getting what I need. So the misnomer that people have is, well, my EBIT is this and I multiply it by that and end of story, right? If that was the case, Cogent wouldn't exist. It's really not that simple. Sometimes a deal is not big enough to change when you say, no, I'd like to stay and keep my $200,000 a year salary. Well, I kind of took that out. And that's something that I'm getting as the buyer going forward. It's not just about the trailing 12. It's about what's going on forward. It's an investment. The buyer needs to do something better with what you are potentially selling on their end. And part of that, especially in a smaller deal, not like a platform deal, but more of a bolt-on scenario or an add-on scenario, that plus often comes from consolidation. And consolidation oftentimes is a person or 2 or 3, not just things that they don't need or synergies like, better cost structures that I have as the buyer than you have as a seller. So I'm getting a plus. So once you start changing the dynamic and you get wishy-washy about what you wanted to do, it could completely upend the fact that that buyer really might not be able to do that deal anymore because they were pushing the envelope on it. Now you just took away a bunch of money that they thought they were going to get after they had a transition period with the seller. Now they want to stay. It becomes a problem. So understanding what they want to do allows you to go in with the best foot forward. But sometimes you just can't turn and pivot on the fact that the seller kind of makes different demands inside of what they're trying to do. So that's why knowing up front, and sticking to it is the key. So a lot of sellers go into it and they figured I hit some mark and I just need to go do something, but they didn't really think about everything else. And that's one of the things they didn't think about is what am I going to do after this? And that's why they get wishy-washy. They give the answer of whatever you want to do, Mr. Buyer. Okay. I don't want you to be here when we're done, or I can't because I'm getting an SBA loan and the SBA says after a year, you can't be here. That becomes a problem if that changes. So it could change a whole bunch of different dynamics. So knowing your why you're doing this and also figuring out what you're going to do afterwards. I mean, is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years of transition, or I want a 2-3 year job and then, transition out? That also to be upfront is the best way to do that, and understanding what's going to work for you, and knowing monetarily as well. How does that, work for you? How much longer do you need to bring in money? Everybody usually has a number that they need to quote unquote retire or do something else, not on a day-to-day basis. And you have to figure that out post-deal, post-tax. I'm not going to have any other kind of income potentially. Can I live off of whatever that money now is generating, plus whatever I saved along the way? That's part of the other problem. A lot of people, they're not very good at saving anything. So they have everything wrapped up into this company. And that changes the dynamic of what you need to do to sell the company. And all of a sudden their timeline changes when they realize, well, I need it 5, 6, 7, $8 million, and I can only get 4. Then I can't sell, which is fine. But knowing that up front is really important. And it's important for the buyer to know that as well, because if they don't think they can get to what you really need, it's better to know that now than to take days and days and days of doing stuff for no apparent reason.
So what are some red flags for buyers with MSPs wise? What are some, I mean, obviously if business is doing bad, if you're losing clients as the MSP, that's a red flag. But what are some other kind of wise MSPs would be selling that buyers would stay away from?
Yeah, customer related things are the biggest thing. Red flags being you're into some shaky industries generally, or you're, everybody's going to check on your customer base, and they're going to ask you, and then way down the road, they're going to actually ask those clients. So if there is anything that's shaky, you're better off bringing it out up front. Customer concentration is always a problem. So we usually start flagging things at 10%. So if it's one client at 10, 11%, probably not a big deal. But you got 2, 3, 4 clients at 10, 11, 12%. All of a sudden, 50% of your revenue is coming from 4 clients.
Right.
It's a little scary. Is the buyer possibly okay with that? Like on the other side of the deal? Sure, because they have, a lot more clients than you most likely. So the concentration doesn't become a problem. The problem is they're paying for it. So they don't want to pay for it and lose it. So that's when you get deal structures, things like that. It could be completely a runaway. We have buyers that you have too much of a concentration issue. They're not even going to try to make something happen unless there's some other kind of major silver lining. So those are huge red flags as far as customers going. How well you keep your customers is important. So those kind of metrics are important. Farming versus new business, those are usually things that people take a look at. A smaller company, let's say something under 5 million in revenue, that's a true MSP. I'm not expecting them to have a whole bunch of new logos or an actual methodology to get those new logos. I'm not really modeling that in. If it's there, awesome. But I am looking to see that your farming part is good, that your account management is good, and that you're not losing customers. So your retention rate is really good, and that you're also set up to make more money off of those customers every year, whether automatically through your agreements, or because you're upselling, or because you're coming up with new things that you can sell into them that they really need, and keeping up with the technology times and things that we're talking about before. That's important for any size company. But there's, other flags as you get bigger. So if I'm looking at an 8, 9, $10 billion company, when you talk about EBITDA multipliers, there's a whole bunch of stuff layered in there that make that math really easy. That's backwards math that you got there from. Things are supposed to be there. So A, B, C, and D need to be true. So if I'm looking at a bigger, $10 million MSP, and they don't have that organic sales engine of some sort, I'm going to grow 5%, 8%, 10% every year, even after I sell the company to you, Mr. Buyer. That's how it's set up. If that's not there, then you just broke the model. D isn't true. So that multiple that you thought you were going to get isn't going to happen. And they actually might not buy the company because they're looking for that. So that's a flag. And folks that, I'm into M&A. M&A is great. But once you get to a certain size, you can't completely just grow by buying other companies. I've run into $10, $12 million companies that somehow got there with farming and buying. There's no hunting going on. There's no new logos happening. And they're also sadly mistaken, that they think their company's worth whatever somebody told them a multiple would be for their bottom line. So that's a problem. Like you said before, the going forward stuff, a good buyer, someone who knows what they're doing, or someone that's working with us, is going to be looking forward. So your past is your past. So we're going to look 3 years in the past to see trends. We're going to look in the trailing 12, the TTM, to see the most recent past, but you can't cherry pick that time frame because you know full well the forward isn't going to be that great. I'm losing some customers, like you mentioned before, or I might. There's there's people on the watch lists, that might be dropping out, or I already know I'm going to have some issues, or I had a fluke. I had some big project thing come up, and that's why I look like I did in the trailing 12, but that's not how we normally look. I'm going to see that. That's, so that's where I'm not giving you some multiple on your trailing 12. It's also good to know that because you want people to see the forward. And if the forward is getting better, it's not Groundhog Day, like we said before, which I expect from like a $3-4 million company. It doesn't move that much, right? I can't guarantee it. But if it's growing at 10% a year, I want you to model that in. So the forward is actually just as important as the backward. So it's a big flag if you're not doing the things, you're big enough to be doing it and you're not doing those things moving forward. Having a whole bunch of employees and none of them have the right paperwork, where there's no non-competes or non-solicits, even more important, because every state non-solicit works, but some states non-competes not so much for employees. But having those things in place, all that paperwork, not having it in there can be pretty scary. We've run into companies that have tons of 1099 contractors and almost no employees. That's not a good setup either. I have some clients, especially ones that are related to accounting firms, that they won't even look at them if the employees aren't mostly W-2s. They're 1099. Forget it. It's too risky. You're already setting yourself up for some potential lawsuits and things like that on the other side of the deal. Plus, you don't know if people are going to come.
The loyalty, in there,
right? Yeah. I mean, they just like, okay, I'm done with you. I appreciate that, and you just lost half of your workforce. The buyer's not going to like that. So all kinds of flags like that are really simple to see, simple to deal with, and highly problematic if they exist.
This is Cogent Conversations.